Hello, and welcome to PEP, which stands for Passion, Empowerment, and Perseverance. I'm your host, Graham Salinger, president and founder of Salinger Coaching Solutions, where we empower success by empowering people. And today I'm joined by Frank Beal. Frank has decades of experience as a business executive, as well as appointments in government and civic associations. Frank has focused much of his career on expanding economic opportunity, social justice, and the environmental quality in Illinois. In 2014, Frank began serving as a full-time volunteer with the Civic Consulting Alliance, a Chicago-based organization with a focus on creating a more prosperous and equitable Chicago region. In his role at the Civic Consulting Alliance, Frank spearheaded a 7-county regional economic development effort, reform of a county property assessment system, and various initiatives to improve transportation. Prior to joining Civic Consulting Alliance, Frank spent 14 years as the executive director of Metropolis Strategies, an influential policy advocacy organization focused on a range of public policy challenges, including criminal justice reform, improved transportation, early childhood education, and affordable housing. Frank has also worked at all levels of the corporate world, having been a CEO, president, vice president, and general manager at Inland Steel Industries. He also has experience in the public sector, having been the director of the Illinois Department of Energy and Natural Resources and special assistant for energy and environmental affairs for Governor James Thompson. Frank serves on the board of Business and Professional People for the Public Interest, a public interest law and policy center dedicated to social justice issues, and as a member of the board of director of the Chicago Metropolis Agency for Planning, CMAP, the region's official planning agency. Welcome to PEP.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Great. So one of the things I want to talk about is I read your bio, and you obviously have a passion for numerous elements of policy. And at Salinger Coaching Solutions, we focus on empowering people's passion, purpose, and perseverance. And so I wanted to just start us off with the conversation about what has driven your passion for economic development and equity policy.
Well, what I would say is that my experience in college was transformative. I went to Antioch College in Ohio, a very progressive liberal institution at the time. And it was founded in the mid-1800s by Horace Mann, who was quoted as saying, "Be ashamed to die until you've achieved some victory for mankind." A grand statement, but it manifested itself in the college atmosphere of community. And the emphasis was on creating a community that we are all in this together. We have a mutual interest in supporting each other, and that included students, faculty, and the administrative staff, and the dishwashers in the dining room, and a very open, collegial kind of atmosphere that said we do better if we do it together. And that changed my outlook from growing up in a Chicago suburb and off to this progressive school, and it forced me to change my major from engineering, not my major, actually, I graduated as an engineer, and forced me to go to graduate school in city planning, because city planning allowed me to work in governmental agencies and the idea of community. So that's a long answer to your question, but it made a difference in my life.
Okay, so you've been driven by a desire to find opportunities to be involved in community and also bring out the best in communities that you've been working with.
Absolutely.
All right. And so this sort of as a follow-up, based on the passion for community that you described, what would you say is your sort of your personal purpose or calling that has been a common denominator in the work that you've done at both the government and business level?
Well, the common denominator stems from what I just described in terms of public service, I've worked for government. I've worked for not-for-profit organizations whose mission was to improve the quality of government. The idea that government is not the problem, government is part of the solution. It's not the entire solution, but good government can make a difference in our lives. And much of what I've done in my career is to improve the quality of government. I did spend 20 years in the private sector, and people ask me the difference between the two, and my answer was often that when I went home at night in the private sector, the issue was how much more money did I generate for myself, for stakeholders, for shareholders, and so on. And when I went home from my governmental jobs or my not-for-profit jobs, the issue was, did I make the world a better place? And there's a psychic satisfaction to that latter that you don't get from the former. I'm not sure what my purpose is. I guess if you look back at my career, the overarching issue is improvement of the quality of our governing systems.
Okay. And I would imagine that there are a lot of challenges with that, and we'll get to sort of specific challenges. I did note in the bio that one of the focuses of Metropolis Strategies was criminal justice reform in Chicago, and we are moments away from an election where criminal justice reform is a hot button issue, and Chicago is often evoked as an example of things not going well. And so with that in mind, can you kind of tell our viewers, from your perspective, maybe what are some things about criminal justice reform in Chicago that they may have some misconceptions about?
Well, they probably don't have any misconceptions about it. It's a system badly in need of reform and repair, starting with the police and the lack of confidence between the public that the police are supposed to serve and the police as an institution. You have a jail system where, as recently as 5 years ago, there were 12,000 people in the county jail. 85% of them that were there had not been convicted of a crime. They were waiting because they couldn't post bond. And often the bond was no more than $200 or $300. And they were sitting month after month after month waiting for a trial to be convicted or exonerated. It's a system that where the Cook County State's Attorney, the previous one, that currently we have a reform person, and Kim Fox is her name, and she's done a lot to focus on violent crime and away from the petty crime that has clogged the jails and the judicial system in the past. So there's a lot of structural reasons why the system is not functioning well, and I've worked on a number of those, the bond reform and reduction in the jail population. Been part of teams helping the new state's attorney reform her office in order to focus on the things that really mattered and stop measuring success by the number of people she puts in jail. So it's a variety of issues deeply embedded in the laws and the practices of the participants as part of the system.
Okay, and so you sort of alluded to Metropolis strategies in terms of the criminal justice reform was looking at the issue of bond and reforming the specific offices that were involved in structural problems. Were there other specific actions that you were taking when you were working there in that field?
Well, there and more recently, even in my current position, finding housing for returning those who are returning from the prison system is a major challenge in Chicago. There's a lot of laws about where you are allowed to live. You can't even live near schools or other places, and it severely restricts the opportunity for housing. So working on that issue is one of the ones we're working on. One of the things that is underway is one of the foundations have supported an effort to understand those opponents to criminal justice reform and the language and the messaging that they're using, and what it is that how they message the issue to make people resistant to reforming the system. So it's a variety of issues ranging from, well, been for the past 5 years, I've been working with the president of Cook County government, who is who's a passionate reformer of the criminal justice system, and she's been doing things like the sheriff's offices under federal jurisdiction because of all the people in the jail and the overcrowded conditions, and they've mandated that the sheriff put people on home monitoring. But he's been reluctant to do it for the classic Willie Horton reason, which is that somebody out on reconnaissance of that kind is going to commit a horrific crime, and he doesn't want to wear the jacket. The president of Cook County said, fine, I'll wear the jacket. It'll be my fault. I'll take the responsibility for that, and stop putting hundreds and hundreds of young men in jail just because you don't want to send them home with an ankle bracelet. So it's many different things. The court system's a mess. It's got a big backlog. The clerk of the circuit court is a disaster. She's going to be leaving office in December of this year, and we're working with her probable successor to reform that whole office. And so.
Okay, so yeah, I heard you say there are a lot of challenges, but a lot of also efforts to deal with those challenges, both at a systematic and grassroots level, but also leadership within government, which you spoke to earlier about sort of your passion for government being the difference maker in people's lives. And so if we broaden the conversation to challenges more specifically within business teams and leaders, something that I do at Salinger Coaching Solutions is that we focus on business teams and leaders to help them sustain productive relationships and growth in challenging contexts. And I know from your bio and just from this conversation so far that you've had to work in explicitly difficult contexts in terms of the policy world, in terms of overcoming systemic challenges, as you just described. So what are some challenges that you have worked through as an industry leader, and what has helped you work through those challenges?
Well, let me preface it by saying that I had the good fortune to join the private sector at a time when the vice president for raw materials, which is the input to the steelmaking process, had launched into a team building program with 8 of his direct reports, and it was an astounding experience. We learned to trust each other. We learned to be honest with each other. We had meetings where the heart of the meeting was discussing problems that could be solved, rather than so many corporate meetings or so many meetings in general. The real meat of it takes place before or after, where people get together in the hallway and say, did you hear what he said? And that kind of thing. We were able to diminish all that kind of sidebar kind of offline kind of stuff and be clear and honest about what needed to be done. It was over a 2-year period where we concentrated on team building, and it was extraordinarily successful. And made a huge difference. In fact, it made such a difference that this particular department, like it was 10,000 employees in this department, because we had coal mines and iron ore mines and lake ships and so on, was performing so much better than the rest of the steel company that the chairman of the board said, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I want everybody else to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out so well because you need to embrace the spirit of team building, not just the mechanics of it.
Sure,
And,
buy-in.
yeah. So building off of that, one of the things that I ended up being, it was a head of all of our coal companies, general manager of all the coal production in the company, which is 4 different coal mines. And we were about to sell 2 of the mines actually in Southern Illinois. And the chairman said to me, I want you to manage the sale of the mine. And he said, I want to make sure that the miners know about it on the day it's announced in the newspaper. And I said, well, you're going to have to get somebody else. I refuse to do it that way. I will let them know what's happening. I said, first of all, they're not dumb. If we start having people poke around the office or poke around the mines, they're going to know why they're there. And if you embrace them and are honest with them, they will make the process a lot better of selling it. And so he said, well, if you want to do it, that's fine. And that's what I was able to do over a year-long period, is tell the miners that we were going to sell. We couldn't promise that the new owner would keep the miners or even keep the mines open, but that's what we were going to do. And we wanted their help, and they were fabulous. They kept up production, they kept up quality, they took pride in their mine, and they were trying to show the buyer that this was a high quality operation.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up getting twice as much money for the mines as the original estimates were. So, but that speaks to the things that I learned in this team building, which is to, you don't need to be hierarchical about it. You don't need to be secretive about it. You need to be honest, and people need to trust you. You need high levels of trust, and it's possible to do in virtually any setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought it out, because as a coach, the work that I do is working directly with specific leaders to coach them and maybe some management issues they're going through, but also doing team coaching and building some of that teamwork capacity that you spoke about in terms of building things like trust and buy-in and community and things like that. Yeah, what you said it was like a 2-year process. Can you just sort of talk a little bit about what that sort of process was that your group went through, what it looked like?
Well, the equivalent of you was a guy named Cliff McIntosh. He happened to be in Canada, and the reason we discovered him is because he had helped on the closure of an iron ore mine up in Canada that we had to close down because the mine ran out of ore, and he did it very successfully. And so we decided that this guy knew what he was doing, and he had facilities in Canada, and we would, since we owned the airplanes for the company, we would fly our team up to Canada and spend a week at a time, maybe 3 different times we did that. But in between times, he would come down to Chicago and meet with us for a day and a half to go over some of the principles that are involved in effective teams. It's not a one-shot deal where you have to work at it. You have to learn to trust each other. You have to understand each other's motivation. We had problems that we had to work on. For example, we would make a distinction between criticism and critique. Criticism is backward looking at fault finding, who made a mistake. Critique is looking at the situation so that when we move forward, we won't make the same mistake. We don't need to blame somebody for it. And so those habits became second nature to us, and it was extremely helpful to us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sort of speaks to changing habits can change culture, and that can change work processes. And you spoke about how that you're even able to sell the mind for more than you thought, because changing habits also can change culture, which changes working relationships. So it's interesting what you said about criticism versus critique. One of the things that I do in terms of empowering teams is I talk about the difference between compliance and commitment, right? You might have a team that is being compliant and doing what the boss says, because they're doing what the boss says. But I mean, when you spoke about sort of the miners really wanting to show the new buyer how committed they were to their team and to the group, I think that also speaks to sort of the difference between just going about and doing your job and going about and really being committed to the work and the job that you're doing.
Exactly. Yes, it's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Great.
It's easy to get compliance in a hierarchical, punitive environment. You can buy compliance or you can mandate compliance, but you get a poor work product out of that.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm sure that is true both in corporate bureaucracy and also at the governmental level. And so as we think about policies and projects and teams or in organizations that have been successful in your experience, you've already spoken to this a little bit, but what else do you think leaders can do to set teams up for success, whether it's policy success or project management and implementation success?
Well, institutions, institutional analysis, and a government department or a corporation or a department of a business or a neighborhood club is an institution, and those institutions need a clear mission because people effectively want to be part of something beyond themselves. It's not just me, and what I'm going to do and my commitment. They want to be part of an organization or institution that is working on something beyond them, something that they cannot do by themselves. And I know today, virtually every agency, department, company has a mission statement, but so many of those are done by management. They're empty, they're put on the wall, they're neglected. But a clear understanding of what the mission of the institution is an essential first ingredient, it seems to me. You really have to know, what are we trying to achieve? What's the desired outcome of our work, our collective work? And once you explore that, and that is not a quick read it and give me a, did you read it? Yeah, okay, then we're done. Working at it and measuring your work against the mission and how your work is contributing to the mission, and measuring our success in achieving the mission is really important. So I would begin with that effort, and it's part of the teamwork process, actually, is coming up with the right mission.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and I know that sometimes, at least in the nonprofit world, and sometimes you also spoke about when you're in the corporate world, a lot of that is making sure the stakeholders are happy and that money's being made. And that sometimes what happens in organizations is that people really drift from the mission because they're chasing other things, and then the people who are working for that mission are all of a sudden, they don't feel like they have alignment with the organization they thought they were working with.
Absolutely, and you see it time after time. It's a corruption of the mission through time and through lack of attention, and you need to keep revisiting it.
And so when there is corruption of a mission or an organization's purpose, what are some things that you have seen leaders do, or what did you do when you're a leader to help bring things back into focus, into alignment?
Well, I go back to the learning I had in the team building effort, which is reminding people that the community, the collective, is the essential ingredient for moving forward. I remember I became president of a subsidiary company, and we had steel distribution centers throughout the West Coast, and I went down to San Francisco introduced myself to the manager of the San Francisco plant, and I said, I'd like to have a meeting of the staff. And he said, oh, sure, be happy to do that. So he invites all the people in the office to a meeting. And I said, no, I mean, all the guys who are working, the truck drivers, all the guys who are out working in the plant. He said, oh, no, they're union. And I said, no, they're part of our staff. They are what makes us successful. The quality of their work is reflected in what the customer receives. Well, they're just union. And that separation is toxic in my view. And those guys out in the plant want as much as a vice president of sales. They want to be part of something they can be proud of, something they can go home and say, we were successful. We got the job done. And so I began incorporating the union members along with the non-union members into the discussion of what our mission was and what we were trying to accomplish and how we measured success. I began sharing with them the financial information. It's eventually it was a public corporation. Eventually it's all public anyway. But on a monthly basis, I could show them, here's our sales, here's our profit, here's where we're troubled, blah, 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 blah. I would go through our finances with them. Why be secretive about it? It's public information. And they felt better for having known what it is. You get a cynic here or there, but basically they felt better.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like one of the things that is consistent in the context that you're speaking about is transparency of process, and even in highly bureaucratic situations, the importance of transparency and building trust in functioning teams.
Absolutely. I like to say that 95% of the time, your staff knows what the hell's going on. You're just not telling them. And if they don't know what's going on, they're stupid. You ought to fire them. Because, the informal networks are really, really efficient. They're often wrong. And you have a stake in making sure that that informal network has the right information, not the wrong information.
Okay. You mentioned the word success multiple times. And so, obviously one way of measuring success is like you said, the financial statements and bringing in clients and things like that. Are there other ways that you would define success in terms of your experience in your career?
Well, for me, I guess it's a combination of if I'm a part of an institution, a department or a division or a company or whatever it is, it's whether or not we achieve the mission that we've set out for ourselves. A part of that is whether or not all the individuals who are customers, clients, and employees feel that we've achieved that mission and get satisfaction or benefit from that. And in the case of employees, it's virtually always the question of whether or not they feel that they're treated fairly, they're part of something larger, they're treated with honesty and integrity. They're likely, not always, likely to feel that they're part of a successful organization. Everybody wants to be part of a successful organization. And you can't kid them. You can't say, oh, we're successful if you're not. You have to tell them what success means, and they'll determine for themselves whether they're part of it.
Great. As we we talk about success. Oftentimes you can't really talk about success without also talking about the flip side of the coin, which is, professional setbacks, either at a personal level or at an institutional level. So what are some ways, Frank, in which you've experienced professional setbacks, and what did you learn from them that empowered you to be the best version of yourself? In other words, how did setbacks actually bridge to some level of success?
Well, the learning that I mentioned before between criticism and critique, a setback is a criticism. And if you turn that around and say, what can I learn for the future? It's liberating. And being liberated to understand that your reaction to these things is more important than the thing itself. And if you can say to yourself, I did the best I could, I made this mistake, I should, in the future, I should do that. It's an opportunity to learn for the future. That's all I got.
Fair enough. Yeah, so Frank, I'd just like to end by asking you this. If you were to talk to someone who has just gotten into an executive leadership role, and that can be on a board, that can be the nonprofit world, corporate world, government, just any kind of sort of executive leadership role, what would be the most important advice that you would give them?
Well, I would say some of which I've already referenced, but first of all, I guess that the cliche of people are our most important product, or is a cliche, but in fact it is an elemental truth, in that you surround yourself by really capable people. Do not hesitate to fire someone who doesn't fit. Every time I fired somebody, the rest of the staff said, "What took you so long? We all knew he was a loser, or he was detrimental to the organization. Why did you wait so long?" So don't be afraid to fire people. Make it clear that they need an opportunity. So that's number one. Number two is it's a collective effort. It is not a series of individual efforts. Don't set up people to compete with each other internally. Set up people to collaborate with each other. And you do that by team building, by a clear mission, by the things that we've talked about. And have fun. That's the third thing. Because you will have fun if you're part of something that is accomplishing the mission that you care about.
That is a great note to end on. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. And good luck to you.
Thank you.